Charlie Moore was born in Cashel in 1897, a son of William and Margaret Moore. Sadly, Charlie was killed in action in September 1918, just a month shy of the signing of the armistice and the end of the Great War. Michael, speaking of the Great War, then I suppose in September now 2018,
right.
nearly 100 years
right,
to the day that your Uncle
the
Charley...
7th of December, or 7th of September. And he was very unlucky because he nearly got there. It was over in November, but he ran out of the trench because somebody was in a shell hole. Now, he could have been dead already, but he ran over to him, and of course the German gun was still on the same, and they were both killed. He was killed with shrapnel. So now I suppose he thought he could do something, but sure, that other soldier could have been dead before he got there. He joined up in Feathered, and he was 21 when he died. He went out in 1914, so he was very young, but because he was only 21 when he was killed. But the grandfather went out after him, but they were never in the same regiment. And Charlie was in the Royal Irish Regiment first, but then he was transferred to the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. Now, that often happened, making up numbers or whatever they be, whatever, because his 2 cap badges and his medals are all there and the miniatures are all there. But I have German postcards here in the house, actual German postcards that was sent from my wife to her husband at the front. Now, the writing is in German and it's very small, but they're actually written on, and all I can make out is that he was called Ernst and she was called Frieda. And one of them is a picture postcard of Rostock in Germany, an ordinary one with a fountain and thing. But the other one is presumably of Frieda, because it's a photograph of around a table outside a house, and she's there sitting at it, and there's 2 maids sitting with her, and there's a waiter or whatever, and you have the towel over his hand. And she's written on that, mein lieber Ernst. Now I know that that's my love Ernst, and your wife Frieda. That's all I can make out. But how they ended up in Cashel here, I don't know. And the other one is of it was a little propaganda one of a little German soldier, a cartoon sort of, just a propaganda, and he's holding the flag, a miniature soldier with the German helmet on him. Don't ask me now.
Do you think they were possibly something that your granddad or Charlie might have picked up and sent
Charlie
home?
Could have sent him.
Okay.
Or my grandfather could have brought him home. Because my grandfather got back, and as I said, he was 96 when he died. So.
And there is some postcards there from Charlie that he sent, isn't there?
Oh, there is, yeah.
Postcards
some of those over my head now would be of him.
Yes.
That he sent. He would have sent him from before he was sent out. From. That he was in Athlone and he was in the Curragh and he was down in Fermoy, the barracks, big barracks down in Fermoy before they were sent out.
Dear Mother, just a line hoping to find you in good health as this leaves myself at present. I received your parcel all right this morning. I could not write. We are very busy. No more. Write soon. From Charlie. While Charlie was in Fermoy preparing to go to the front, Ireland was in a state of revolution. The following postcard is dated Friday the 12th of May, the day the last of the revolutionaries, James Connolly and Sean McDiarmid, were executed in Dublin. Dear Mother, just a line hoping to find you in good health as this leaves myself at present. I am back now so you can write. Tell B. Reardon I was asking for him. Write soon. No more to say at present. From Charlie.
But why he went, I don't know. I mean, some went for adventure, some went for the freedom of small nations. More thought that Ireland was going to get their freedom. They all had their own, and they were all young. You know what I mean? He wasn't married, he went for adventure. Same as going to Vietnam or any of those places, you know. But it was a terrible war, though. I think it was the worst war as regards manpower. I mean, it was nothing to have 100,000 killed in one day, 20,000 killed. It meant nothing. Heroes led by donkeys. Yeah. They were cannon fodder, as they were known as. I mean, the machine guns must have been terrible. Just ripped them asunder. But my grandfather got back, and there's letters from him on His Majesty's Expeditionary Force to East Prussia, stamped officially, you know. But there's a lock of Charlie's hair here in the house. Now, whether he sent it to the mother or whether the mother cut it before he went, but she always had that inside in a little lock of his hair, yeah. But I was able to get in contact with the War Office in England, and for I think it's €7, they'll go out and they'll take a photograph of the actual grave, the same as you go out and take one yourself, because I'll never be there. But they did, and it was lovely to see the stone. And I'm only sorry that the father, you know, he wasn't alive to see that.
So where is he buried, Michael?
He's buried in, well, I could have it pronounced wrong, but it seems like Outerstein or Outerstein, British military cemetery in France. And it's a communal grave, very well kept, like they all are, like. You know, the lines of graves are perfect, but they took a perfect photograph of it and sent it on to me, the same as if I went out myself and stood in front of the grave and took the photograph. You could read the name, you know, but lovely to get it.
Must have been terrible hard times then, Michael, that news coming home.
Yeah, the telegram was there that she got, you know.
You're joking.
Yeah. It was all telegrams then, like, and everyone dreaded a telegram at any time. But during the war, I mean, they really, if they had someone out there. But then again, in England, there were whole streets wiped out, whole families wiped out, because they all joined up together, and they were all put into the one regiment, and they were all killed at the Somme or whatever. So they stopped that practice. There was one woman, I don't know, was it in Ireland or England? She had 5 sons in the war, and 4 of them were killed.
Oh my God.
And they demobbed the 5th fella and sent him home.
Okay.
On compassion, because she'd have been left maybe with no one.
Yeah. I know that the Darcys in the Rocks, Danny
right,
Darcy, there was
right,
5 of those fought in the war, and they all came home.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one of them might have been injured or that.
Yeah.
But all
I
of the
remember
Darcys
Danny.
came back.
I remember Danny and Molly. Yeah. Molly was great at the singing, and I think the Ryan brothers, they were out there. Some of those Ryans, they were out in the First World War. Yeah. And of course Martin Bob's father, he was out in the First World War. An awful lot of Irishmen died. And
I think it's a pity that there's not any memento or any plaque.
Well, they've done it above in Ballingarry. They've put up a plaque to the men that fought and died in the Great War. But seemingly they've never thought of it here. It should be everywhere now, because times are gone, those days are gone. But they were stigmatised when they came back. There was a stigma down on them that they fought with the British Army, you know. Like, they were ostracised. They couldn't get a job, they weren't wanted anywhere. You know, and like, okay, they all had their own reasons for going out. I mean, my grandfather was out there and he always told the story, the amateurs. And they fought up to the very last second. They fired at one another up to the very last second. And he said, it was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, wasn't it? But it stopped dead on. But he said the silence was worse than the noise. Some men couldn't take the silence. Now there were no birds whistling or anything like that, because there wasn't a tree, everything was burnt. But it was the silence. They just could not take the silence. And none of them moved, he says, because if you put up your head, the sniper could, and they didn't move, the Germans didn't move. But he said this German got up out of the trench and he had the gun straight up, in the rifles pointed straight up in the air, and he emptied it, kept firing it up in the air. And he said he fired it down on the ground with disgust, absolute disgust, put his two hands in his pocket and walked away. And everyone came out after that. It was over. But he always told that story. If he had pointed the gun at him, he'd have been shot. But he made sure that the gun was up in the air and he emptied it. And he wanted to show that he was finished with it. He had enough of it, and they all had enough of it. And he just hopped it off of the ground and walked away. Put the two hands in the pockets like a schoolboy and walked off. He was going home. So it was over. But to the day my grandfather died, in his little room over, he could not bear thunder. Lightning didn't bother him, but he could not bear the sound of the thunder. And it reminded him of the guns.
I suppose an awful culture, Michael, at that time. A lot of people never spoke then, I think.
Oh no. No. They might tell an odd thing.
Yes.
But they didn't tell they saw a lot. So like any of the lads, like the Vietnam War, young men exposed to that sort of, it must have been terrible. It must have been absolutely terrible, because those machine guns would cut a body in two halves. And I remember the Temperance Hall, because all the old men going in, and a lot of the veterans that fought in the First World War used to go in there. I can remember names like the Guy Welch. He had a kind of a lame step. I remember Johnny Butler going in there. All old men now in my time. My own grandfather. And of course, everyone was smoking. You wouldn't see absolutely nothing inside the room. Only smoke, between pipe smoke and cigarette smoke. And they'd be playing billiards. Fine table. First class Burroughs and Watts. Full size snooker billiard table. And that's now over in Lassmore Park. They got it, and they totally restored it, and I'm sure it cost a few pounds to restore it, and made a fine job of it. I did see it, but there'd be a pegboard up then on the wall with two pegs, and I think that ended up above in the ball alley. Now, to the best of my memory, if it's still there or not, I don't know, but it was just two timber pegs, and you moved them along as a fella be playing billiards. And I used to get the job of sitting up in a big high thing, moving along, reading a comic, and of course a fella'd look up and he was way behind, because I'd forget to put on and I get a bit of a cue across the fingers. John Kane now, they'd have been all the young fellas of the day. Mikey's son, that's out the country, big tall, what's his name, Connie. Yes. They'd be all the young fellas, the teenagers and the young men of 20s of the day at that time, when I was a child. But fantastic place. Now if you turned off the light in any of those two rooms, with the big potbelly stove, huge one, you just see a red round glow. It was so hot. You can imagine the heat that was in there, and none of the windows ever opened because they were all stuck. So you can imagine what it was like in there, smoking, but they played cards in there, and it was a great place, like. But a lot of the veterans used to go in there of the Great War. Yes. And my grandfather made my mother promise, my father's father, that he'd never be put out of his own little house. He wanted to die in his own little bed in the little room downstairs with the clay floor, with his feet jammed from one end of it to the other, because he was 6'2", I think, and he could never lie straight in the bed because the bed was so tight that when you shoved it in and out, there was a furrow in the wall made in the plaster, and the paper always got tore. It was that tight. But he had to sleep with his knees bent. But he did die eventually in that bed. Around the same time, same period. He died before the grandmother, about 1958, but died peacefully.
Okay.
And he got his wish. My father then, he was in the old IRA, and of course there's a photograph of him there with Ned Rogan, and he's at the back. Oh, very young man, like.
How young do you think he was, Michael? When
I'd say about 18 or 19. That's all he could have been. That had been 1921, I think. Yeah, that had been the Black and Tan time. And I think he was more of a runner than anything else. I think that's he was, bringing the messages and that, because he was so young and, but now in the lane you had this house here, and you had this 5 houses opposite me, but you had the Holy Family Hall, as I remember it, but it was originally the Temperance Hall, and then it was originally at the Mechanics Institute. It was the first national school in the town of Cashel. But the Black and Tans were stationed there, a few of them, at one stage, and the Reardons, of course, lived in the house next to it, number 5, and Pach Reardon now, that was their home house, like Bobby's father. And of course the curfew would be on. Everyone had to be in. You had to have your windows blackened. You couldn't have no light, no nothing. Nobody on the street. They would just shoot, and that was it. But Pach, with all his clothes on except his shoes, he went out in his stocking feet, just for a walk out the lane. Just got to the corner and looked down towards the rock. And here's a couple of them coming up the street. And they shouted and they fired straight up Friar Street. And he ran. And they knew where he went, like they knew he came down the lane. And he was gone in and had to get into bed with the clothes on him. And they butted every door down along and searched all the houses, because they knew he had to be somewhere, that he couldn't have got away that fast. But he got away with it, but he was very lucky that night that he wasn't shot. They fired at him straight up Friar Street. They could have hit anyone. But that's the times that were in it. They had the free hand. They were sent over to do that, like. But when the split came, then he took the Free State side, and he joined the Free State Army. He fought with Collins, and would have been in Clonmel, and he'd be based in the Curragh and the various barracks around. But there's a story he didn't say much about the Civil War, but there is a story, and I do remember him. He hated milk. He had an absolute phobia for milk, and anything that looked milky, he wouldn't eat custard. Now he put milk in his tea because it changed immediately, like the colour. But the story was, the old tunics that went up into the neck, he got a rash around the neck, and he was based in the Curragh, and of course he was put into the sick bay, and all they had at that time was a milk and bread poultice, which would draw the rash, and you had to put a bandage around it. But he always told the story, he woke up in the dark and this trickling was going on, and he thought he was bleeding or something, and it was a load of mice, and they all eaten the bread and the milk soaked in it, finished him with milk for all time. Just had a phobia for the rest of his life about milk. I suppose it would give you a bit of a shock, like,
God, it would, yeah.
Now, I remember there was postcards, they're still in the house. There's 3 postcards in the house. They're actual photograph postcards, but you can write on the other side of them. And they're of a place called Ballyvoyle. Now, I'd never heard of Ballyvoyle in my life, but it says Ballyvoyle, County Waterford, the viaduct. And it's a huge, not an ordinary bridge now, but those tall ones with the big columns, and there'd be so many arches, big high one. the IRA were blowing up an awful lot of these bridges, and that was blown up. And the first postcard that he sent to my mother was of the train down in the gorge, and the carriages hanging down, and the few that were left above at the top, and all the bridge were gone, big heap of rubble. And he was stationed down there. They had to guard the bridge while they were rebuilding it. And the next one then is when you see the carpenters and they're putting up all the forums to put up the new arch, the bridge, and the third one is when it was completed. But they're a unique set of actual photographs.
And you have them, Michael.
I have them there.
Yeah, we must get a look at them. Yeah.
But he gave all during the Civil War. He was in with Billy Kane and the V. O'Ryan. And that's the three of them there behind me on the wall. And they wanted him to stay on in the army. He was 15 or 16 years or 18 years in the army. But they didn't. The state was being established, and I suppose they had enough of it maybe. But they would have been kept on in the army. But he gave up the army and went working with the council then when he came back.
Did you say he often spoke of Collins, did he?
Oh yeah, he said he was the finest man that he ever seen in uniform, Michael Collins. He's just that build of a man. I think he was his hero. I think his idol. You know, that generation didn't have idols, but if you like, he was his hero and his idol. Yeah, he saw him at parades. Yeah, he said it was an awful pity the day he was shot. But that's what civil war is.
History of the country could have been different.
Civil wars are the worst war of the whole lot. You know, it splits a country in